In public affairs, relationships are everything. But here's the math problem small teams face. There are hundreds of legislators, regulators, coalition partners, and allies who could matter to your work. You have, let's say, one or two people who could actually pick up the phone, send an email, or walk into an office. So, how do you decide who gets your attention? How do you make sure nothing falls through the cracks? And how do you make every interaction count when you don't get many of them? That's what we're talking about today. Welcome back to Policy Wins. I'm Tommy Zai, and this is episode 2 of our Small Team Big Impact series. Practical strategies for lean public affairs teams who are doing serious work with limited resources. Last episode, we talked about building a tracking system that filters out the noise before it reaches you. Today, we're talking about the relationship side of the equation. How to map your stakeholders strategically, stay organized across every interaction, and run outreach that actually lands. Here's something I've noticed working with small public affairs teams over the years. They usually know who their most important relationships are: the senior member on the relevant committee, the agency contact who picks up the phone when they call, the coalition partner who can move an issue. They know who these people are. The problem isn't knowledge. The problem is what happens to every other relationship that also matters. The legislative staffer who's doing most of the actual work on a bill. The mid-level regulator who hasn't been important yet but will be in 6 months. The aligned advocacy group that you've met twice but never fully engaged. Those relationships tend to fall into a second pile, the "I should follow up on that someday" pile. And for a small team, someday often never comes. What ends up happening is that relationship management becomes entirely reactive. You engage when there's an immediate need. You go quiet when things are calm. And then 6 months later, you need something from someone you haven't spoke to in a year, and you're starting from zero. The fix isn't to have more conversations, it's to have a system that tells you who you should be talking to, when, and why, before the moment of need. A stakeholder map sounds like something that belongs in a strategy deck, but what I'm talking about is much more practical. At its core, a stakeholder map is just a way of organizing your relationships by how much they matter, where they stand, and what needs to happen next with each one. Here's how I recommend small teams approach it. Start by identifying every person and organization that could meaningfully influence or be influenced by your top priority issues. Don't try to do this for everything at once. Start with your 2 or 3 highest priority issues and build from there. Then, for each one, ask 2 questions. How much do they matter to this issue, and where do they currently stand? Those 2 dimensions, influence and alignment, are all you need to prioritize your relationship efforts. The people with high influence and uncertain or opposing alignment are where you invest the most energy. The people with high influence and strong alignment are your allies. You keep them warm and mobilize them when you need to. The lower influence contacts get periodic attention, but don't drive your calendar. This doesn't have to live in a sophisticated system. A well maintained spreadsheet can do this job just fine. But if you're using a purpose built tool, this is where things like alignment tags, priority fields, and issue associations start to really pay off. Because you can filter dynamically, you can pull up every high priority, uncertain alignment contact on a specific issue in seconds, rather than scrolling through a list trying to remember who's who. In Quorum, we use a stakeholder alignment and issue tagging system to build exactly this kind of map. But the principle is the same regardless of tools. Know your people, know where they stand, and build a system that keeps that picture current. The second piece of this is interaction tracking. And I'll be honest, this is the part most small teams skip, usually because it feels like overhead that they don't have time for. But here's what happens when you don't track your interactions. Your one-on-one meetings exist only in your head, or maybe in a personal notes app. There's no shared record. If someone on your team leaves, those relationships and the context around them leave with them. And when you sit down to prepare for a meeting 6 months later, you're trying to remember what you talked about last time from memory. The goal of interaction tracking isn't bureaucracy, it's continuity and leverage. Continuity means that when you walk into a meeting, you already know what was said last time, what you committed to, and what has changed since then. That level of preparation signals to the other person that this relationship matters to you, and it shows. Leverage means that over time, you're building a record of which interactions produced results and which didn't. That's data you can use to sharpen your approach. For small teams, the key is making interaction logging as frictionless as possible. Logging a meeting note should not take 15 minutes, it should take 2. A quick summary, any follow-up actions, and a tag for the issue it relates to. If you're using a platform that has a mobile app, log in on the way back from the meeting while it's still fresh in your mind. If you're working with email, forwarding key exchanges to a shared log can take just a few seconds. Whatever system you use, the habit matters more than the tool. The last piece I want to talk about is outreach, because this is where small teams often feel the gap most acutely. A large team can run targeted outreach to dozens of offices simultaneously. A small team can't, but that doesn't mean your outreach has to feel small. A few things that can help. First, templates are your best friend if you use them right. The goal isn't to send the same email to everyone. The goal is to have a strong, well written starting point that you can personalize in under 5 minutes. A good template handles the structure and the core message. You handle the 1 or 2 sentences that make it feel like it was written specifically for that person. That combination is fast and effective. Second, know your open rates and what's working. If you're sending outreach and not tracking whether people are engaging with it, you're flying blind. Over time, even simple data on what's landing helps you refine your approach. Third, and this one is underrated, prepare your leave behinds before you suddenly need them. A one-page brief on the bill you're going in to discuss, a short bio brief on the official you're meeting with. These take time to put together in the moment, but if you build them proactively as part of your regular workflow, they're ready when you need them. Small teams can't out-volume large teams on outreach, but they can out-prepare them. And in public affairs, preparation is often what makes the difference. Here's today's takeaway. You can't be everywhere, but with the right map, you can make sure you're always in the right place. Build your stakeholder map around influence and alignment, not just familiarity. Track your interactions so nothing lives only in your head. Make your outreach feel personal even when it's efficient. And prepare your materials before the moment of need, not during it. The teams that manage relationships best aren't always the ones with the biggest teams. They're the ones with the clearest picture of who matters and what needs to happen next. If you found this useful, share it with your team or with anyone building a public affairs function from scratch. These habits are a lot easier to build early than to retrofit later. Next episode in this series, we're talking about reporting, how small teams communicate their impact to leadership without turning it into a data dump. I'm Tommy Zai. Thanks for listening.